The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Let's be friendly with our friends is actually the title of this segment of Walking Through the Language of the Heart. The book is The Language of the Heart, Bill W.'s Grapevine writings. And on the line with me right now is our good friend and Take 12 Recovery Radio contributor, Mr. Chris S. Hey, Chris.
What's up, Monty? How's everything going?
It's going chipper, my friend. So let's be friendly with our friends. These are people, I'm going to assume, for the most part, are not members of Alcoholics Anonymous, but people that we want to be friends with, or the wisdom demands that we are. Is that kind of like how it goes?
You know, in the earlier days of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was certainly important for Bill Wilson to be accepted by some of the professions, to have legitimacy. And acceptance by some of the professionals. There certainly is an effort today to stay friendly with our friends and to collaborate and work with some of them. But I think it's less important to us today than it was earlier on. Because we don't need the legitimacy anymore. We're legitimate, but
we're not proving ourselves anymore.
We don't need to prove ourselves anymore. There's probably 10,000 psychiatrists and doctors that are AA members. And early on they weren't members. They were people who Bill was struggling to be accepted by, and so it's kind of a different perspective now. You and I don't read any of these things, so I'm not really sure what he's going to be talking about. In this article tonight, the article we're going to be discussing is from August 1957, and it's titled "The Physicians." So last week was the psychiatrist, right? That was very interesting.
Yes, it was.
Next week it's going to be the clergy. So and then press, radio, and television. So he's covering the gamut of how we need to appropriately collaborate or appropriately approach these professions so as not to alienate ourselves, and thus let's be friends with our friends. So again, I think it's important to do that. Bill always stressed humility. By the 50s, that was one of his main themes. Not being too big for your britches, and being a know-it-all, and understanding that we have a lane that we're really supposed to remain in. One alcoholic helping another alcoholic, and when we start to comment on or criticize or get involved in some of these other lanes, we can cause lasting damage. So he put a lot of material together, kind of guiding us so that we wouldn't do that.
All right. Well, launch us forth there, my friend.
Okay, The Physicians, August 1957. On television recently, I watched as the American Medical Association in convention installed its new president. At first, thinking it might be a routine affair, I nearly switched to a whodunit. I'm now very glad that I did not, for those doctors gave me a most memorable and moving hour. Up got the new president to make his inauguration address. He said little of the science of medicine. To my surprise, he pointed his talk, just as we often do in AA meetings, straight to the newcomers. In this case, the young doctors just entering practice. He told them that no doctor, however well trained scientifically, could get far until he was able to make sick people feel that he understood them as human beings, and that every real doctor had to be possessed of the deepest dedication and faith. Such was his theme, and how he did go to town with it. He certainly carried the message, and I saw as seldom before that we AAs certainly have no monopoly on the practice of the 12 step. So it's long gone into history. Who this president of the AMA was at that period of time, and probably no one remembers what he's talking about, the television address. But the main point is the humanity that is necessary in a healing endeavor.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I've met some doctors that don't have very good bedside manner. And then I've met some doctors that do. And I want to be around the ones that do more than I want to be around the ones that don't. And
Amen.
I think that can be true as 12-steppers too. Monty, with our attitude, I think our attitude can be attractive or it can be distractive.
We can very quickly forget from whence we came, some of us. And that might have a lot to do with where we are and working our own program. But I've watched guys come out of a year-long faith-based treatment program, get into Alcoholics Anonymous, become very active, and then turn into the grump of grumps and just treat people like, why don't you pull yourself by your bootstraps? All the stuff that guy couldn't handle when people talk to him that way. He became that. This, heavy mustache, never shaved, grumpy old gray-haired guy, and that's all they could describe him as, because that's all he offered, right? And I often thought, gosh, dude, I will call him dude, I won't say his name. Do you not remember whence you came? I think it is vital that we, when we talk about we do not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, I think that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And listen, early on, believe it or not, Monty, I know this is probably very difficult for you to envision, but I was very opinionated.
Oh, you?
In my first couple of years, and I, believe it or not, I was critical of certain professions and certain people out there that were making an effort to try to help me when they didn't really know what they were doing. And that's not a good attitude to have. And and what that's just a rookie attitude, because I'm telling you, what I understand about alcoholism and substance abuse disorder today is we need everybody, and certain people are going to be more effective than others, and certain people are going to understand things a little bit better than others, but we need the whole village.
Yes.
We're in so much trouble with this thing called alcoholism or drug addiction. And alienating people and cutting people out of the herd, because we've got an issue with this or an issue with that is something that Bill was very, very passionate about telling us we need to avoid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
So several citations for distinguished service were given. One of them to a layman for his outstanding work among the nation's infirm and disabled. He had proven to thousands of sufferers that they need no longer be emotionally or spiritually crippled, and that some sort of useful and gainful work could always be theirs. Pointing out that self-pity is a prevalent ailment of the crippled, he quoted the Persian who had no shoes. I wept because I had no shoes until I saw a man who had no feet. The beaming man behind the lectern knew whereof he spoke, for he himself had no legs. He had been on artificial limbs for years. Clearly, dedication, fortitude, and faith had been his reliances. It was for these things that the AMA had given him such a single recognition. That's cool. I told you, I think last week about the recognition that was given to a friend of ours who was a former president of ASAM, American
Yeah.
Society of Addiction Medicine, and he had a wonderful acceptance speech, and he really gave Alcoholics Anonymous a good plug.
Right.
And someone like that, now, picture an auditorium with hundreds of psychiatrists, maybe 400 or 500 psychiatrists, and someone that was the ex-president saying nothing has shown more results than Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a powerful message. And that was a physician, and you want to know that that's one of our friends.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't have put an AA member up there and have them say that and have the same impact.
Right. Right.
There was real credibility involved with this individual because everyone knew his reputation and everything. Now, as far as doctors, I'm gonna go on a little tangent here. One of the things that I do with doctors is I let doctors know that I'm in long-term recovery. Now, I don't do it so that they don't prescribe me the wrong thing, because I'm informed personally about what the wrong thing is. Okay,
they may not be.
It's my responsibility to know what the wrong thing is. It's not the doctor's. Okay?
Yeah,
I let a doctor know I'm in long-term recovery so that I might gain referrals from them. And we have a good friend of ours who is our general practitioner who sends my wife and I somebody, 5 or 6 people a year. He'll point in our direction because they're drug seeking, or they look like they would rather not live the type of life that they're living. And he's humble enough to know that he does not have the wherewithal to help these people. He doesn't have the time. He doesn't have the passion. He doesn't have the lived experience. So he passes those people our way, and and then there are doctors who really specialize in alcoholism and drug dependence, and for the most part, the things that they learn are valuable, and sometimes their treatments are really valuable. But for the most part, I truly do believe that it's this illness, alcoholism, and I'll say drug addiction too, are illnesses that are based on spiritual dysfunction. So the practitioners that want to treat our alcoholism as a whole, treat our alcoholism with drugs, are at best treating the phenomenon of craving. They're not treating the underlying causes and conditions of our alcoholism.
They're treating the symptom,
which are spiritual in nature. And experienced doctors will understand that and know that they have a lane, and that their lane is gonna be able to get somebody so far in a certain way. And then we AAs have a lane, and we know we'll be able to get somebody so far in a certain way. We're certainly not gonna pretend to treat serious health conditions as AA members. We're not we really should stay in our lane and refer people to doctors when something is something that the doctors have been trained on and understand how to treat. I'm not going to tell my sponsee how to get rid of an infection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just not my specialty.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's an interventionist the other day. We were talking about the subject. Whenever I talk to any interventionist, whether it's friends or professionally, the subject of MAT comes up always, harm reduction, and we talked a little bit about that. And he put it this way. He said, if you're drowning in the ocean and a life raft comes by, you may not like the color of the life raft, but you get into the life raft. Now, recovery is about you don't stay in the lifeboat for the rest of your life. You end up going to a bigger boat and eventually getting on shore. And so the life raft or the lifeboat many times is MAT, or it may be harm reduction. But once, I think you said it one time, that the point of the 12 steps is to move on from there, talking about, developing a relationship with God and where anywhere is good enough to make a beginning, provided it makes sense to you, the literature says, right? But the whole point is to move on from there.
Yeah, so two stories. One of them I came up with giving a talk the other day in a treatment center, and this is basically what I said. I said, the first 9 steps, say you have a swimming pool that is really grungy and really cloudy.
Mm-hmm.
The first 9 steps are the shock treatment that you treat that swimming pool with. It's a massive amount of chlorine or whatever, and it's a shock treatment. Now, you don't continue necessarily to shock that pool. What you do is you put a maintenance schedule together of a certain amount of chlorine, and that's our steps 10, 11, and 12. So our initial experience with the 12 steps is a shock. It's like clearing out the massive amount of toxic self-consciousness we have. The first 9 steps treat that, and then step 10, 11, and 12 is like putting a maintenance level of chlorine into the swimming pool. And listen, every once in a while you got to reshock the pool, right?
Yeah.
Because you went away on vacation or something, right? So it's kind of like the same way. Now I want to tell a Clancy story. Anybody that's listening to this has probably heard of Clancy, and it's his invisible boat story. So I'm totally giving him credit for this, but it does make a lot of sense. So you're drowning from alcoholism. Picture you're out in the middle of the ocean, and all of a sudden these guys come by and they're rowing an invisible boat. They're above the water and they're rowing, but you can't see the oars, you can't see the boat, you don't know what the hell's going on. And they're saying, come on, get on. You're drowning. Get on with us. And you're like, wait, I don't see how this is going to work. I don't see a boat. And you go down a couple more times. Finally, you're willing to get in this invisible boat. And you get in the invisible boat, and they say, okay, grab the oars and row like hell. And because you're really desperate and you've been suffering like crazy and you're out of options, you start rowing. And as you start rowing, the boat starts to appear. Okay? Now you see the boat that you're rowing. And here's what happens. Every once in a while, somebody in that invisible boat stops rowing, because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. And what happens is the boat starts to disappear and you end up back in the water. And then they come by again. They say, jump back in the boat, and it's an invisible boat, and you start to row, and all of a sudden you're back in an entity that is keeping you from drowning.
Wow.
And there used to be conferences and stuff called "Get in the Boat."
Yeah.
and it makes a lot of sense because the person who is dying of alcoholism sees these guys show up from AA with a big book, and they don't see the boat.
Right.
But if they're desperate enough to get in and start to row, they start to see, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
Now I get this recovery stuff. So I love that. I love
That's
that
a great
story.
story. That's a great story. Okay, now I've got one in my another one in my arsenal. So the next
Okay.
time I'll have to definitely credit Clancy for it. And thank you. That's excellent.
You got it. You got it. Okay. The gathering of doctors so spiritually centered set me thinking. I keenly realized that doctoring is mainly a spiritual vocation and that the vast majority of physicians really join the profession to serve their fellow human beings. We AAs are apt to set a triple A rating on ourselves and our fellowship. But when the names of certain doctors come to mind, doctors who devoted themselves to us in our pioneering time, I wonder how many of us could really match their humility with their dedication. Take my own doctor, William D. Silkworth. In our forthcoming history book, AA Comes of Age, I've drawn a word portrait of him, which runs in part as follows. As we looked back over those early scenes in New York, we saw often in the midst of them the benign little doctor who loved drunks, William Duncan Silkworth, then physician in chief of the Charles B. Towns Hospital in New York. The man we now realize was very much a founder of AA. From him, we learned the nature of our illness, and he supplied us with the tools with which to puncture the toughest alcoholic ego, those shattering phrases by which he described our illness, an obsession of the mind that compels us to drink, and the allergy of the body that condemns us to go mad or die. Without these indispensable passwords, AA could never have worked. Dr. Silkworth taught us how to till the black soil of hopelessness out of which every single spiritual awakening in our fellowship has since flowered. In December 1934, this man of science had sat humbly by my bed following my own sudden and overwhelming spiritual experience, reassuring me, "No, Bill," he had said, "you are not hallucinating. Whatever you've got, you better hang on to it. It is so much better than what you had only an hour ago." These were great words for the AAs to come. Who else could have said them? So Bill is really crediting Dr. Silkworth here with the definition, or at least the description, of alcoholism. And when Bill had his white light experience, which was a sudden spiritual experience, he didn't poo-poo it. He saw it as a fundamental change in attitude and outlook, a shift in personality. And thought system and behavior and all that. And he recognized that that was something that was good. And, he didn't just say, "Oh, Bill, it was the drugs. I've been giving you lots of drugs for your detox." It was the drugs. He didn't do that. He collaborated with Bill's belief that he had been fundamentally changed and that he was not going to drink anymore, which he didn't.
So this kind of paints a picture, kind of a different picture of what we're used to as far as men of medicine and spirituality. And we kind of get the impression, I think, at least in most of my life, that doctors were all about science, and if you couldn't prove it, it wasn't valid. And certainly all the medical TV shows, how inaccurate they can be, but kind of showed you that, well, okay, you believe in God, but I'm a man of science, so, we're not going to talk about that kind of. This kind of paints a different picture. And I'm wondering if more men and women of medicine actually do believe in a spiritual element of physical healing, mental healing, and so forth than what we give them credit for.
I think like the normal population, I think that there are doctors that believe very, very much in spirituality, and then there are doctors that are atheist or agnostic, just like there are out there in the real world.
Sure.
But I'll tell you what, the doctors that speak to me, the philosophers that speak to me, the wise people who have left incredibly great writings, the ones that speak to me are the ones who believe in spirituality. They believe in and there is more than what we can just see
Sure.
and experience right here and right now. I like Carl Jung a lot more than I like Sigmund Freud, because Freud was an atheist and Carl Jung was very much spiritual. Yeah, and I like Beethoven, a lot more than I like Stravinsky or something. Like Beethoven was a very, 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 very spiritual composer.
Yeah.
Bach was a very devout religious composer. I love Bach's music, and sometimes, so I don't know. I have an ability to kind of recognize that common connection to spiritual values with different people, and they're the ones that really speak to me.
Sure. Sure.
When I wanted to go to work with alcoholics, he led me to them right there in his hospital, risking his professional reputation. Now let's just unpack that a little bit.
Wow.
You got to understand that William Silkworth was the chief physician at this hospital. This hospital was owned by a man named Charlie Towns, who was not really a doctor. He was just a businessman. So really the place was being run by this guy, Dr. Silkworth, William D. Silkworth. And reputation meant a whole lot. Back then, it means a whole lot now. But I think it even meant more, back in the 30s. So your professional reputation is something that you're going to be protective of. Now, picture this. He saw Bill Wilson fundamentally change overnight with a spiritual experience, and then want to try to transfer that spiritual experience to other alcoholics that this physician, this chief physician, was treating in in a hospital that was specializing in alcoholism and drug addiction. So Monty, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That would be like a banker recognizing that somebody with a Ouija board was making better investments than their investor portfolios were making, and dragging people down to the Ouija board, to have them decide on what to invest in. You know what I mean? Like it could completely ruin your reputation. Like this. So he was really,
he was sold.
He was mission driven too.
Yeah.
He wanted to help these alcoholics, and you know what? If he wasn't able to do a lot with a certain class of hopeless alcoholics, and Bill Wilson could, he's taking these guys to Bill.
Yeah.
And we got to be very, very thankful of that humility.
Yeah.
Because I'll bet you there was a lot of doctors back then that would not have done that. That would have just, brushed Bill off as a crazy person, and continued to, use the ineffective treatment methodologies that they were employing.
Little belladonna, maybe.
Yeah, or hydrotherapy.
Yeah.
which is like strapping you on a gurney and hitting you with hot and cold water for 3 or 4 hours.
Right. Yeah. That's effective.
That hydrotherapy was a treatment for alcoholism back then.
Wow.
Believe it or not, I think it certainly cleaned up the puke and stuff like that, but I don't know that it did any lasting. There was any lasting help. So after six months of failure on my part to dry up any drunks, Dr. Silkworth again reminded me of Professor William James's observation that truly transforming spiritual experiences are nearly always found on calamity and collapse. Stop preaching at them, Dr. Silkworth had said, and give them the hard medical facts first. This may soften them up at depth so that they will be willing to do anything to get well. Then they may accept those moral psychology ideas of yours and even a higher power. That is a really cool paragraph. Wow. So first of all, I just reread Varieties of Religious Experience last year. I read it, like in year one, and it was so thick and so dated, and it wasn't reading prose. It was, it was speeches that were given, and they don't translate sometimes very well to the written page. So it was a very difficult read. But the one thing in there were two things in there. One of them was it talked about this conversion experience, this sudden and profound conversion experience that these people had. But there was also something in that book that I paid a lot of attention to, and that was Billy Sunday. Have you ever heard of Billy
Yes.
Sunday?
Yeah.
All right, like around the mid 1800s or something, he was a tent preacher, and he
Yeah.
went around preaching the gospel to alcoholics, and a ton of alcoholics got sober because of Billy Sunday, and I think a lot of what we do in our speaker meetings, a lot of what we do in carrying the message and sharing the message, can all be tracked all the way back to what Billy Sunday was doing in the 1800s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
4 years later, Dr. Silkworth had helped to convert Mr. Charlie B. Towns, the hospital's owner, into a great AA enthusiast, and encouraged him to loan $2,500 to start preparation for the book Alcoholics Anonymous, a sum, by the way, which was later amounted to over $4,000. Then, as our only medical friend at the time, the good doctor boldly wrote the introduction to our book, where it remains to this day and where we intend to keep it always. All right, so Charlie Towns did become really, really good friends with Bill and a lot of the sober alcoholics in New York. And when they made a deal with a book publisher to print up all these books, they had no money to pay the publisher. So the printer
Yeah.
kept the books and said, "I'll give you the books when you give me the money." And so nobody had $5,000 or whatever it was to get these books out of hock. So they went to Charlie, who owned and ran the hospital, Towns Hospital, and he lent him the money to get the books out. And we might not have big books if it wasn't for Charlie Towns.
Wow.
Perhaps no physician will ever give so much devoted attention to so many alcoholics as Dr. Silkworth. It is estimated that in his lifetime, he saw an amazing 40,000 of them.
Oh, my goodness.
In the years before his death in 1951, in close cooperation with AA and our red-headed powerhouse nurse, Teddy, he administered to nearly 10,000 alcoholics in New York's Knickerbocker Hospital alone. None of those he treated will ever forget the experience, and the majority of them are sober today. How about if that's actually true? The majority of them are sober today. Now, what he would do is he would detox them and then shove them to Bill for the spiritual maintenance that will prolong sobriety into a recovery. So sure, that might even be true that the majority of the people this guy treated are sober today.
How did they track that?
I don't think they did. I think, and you know as well as I do that Bill rounded up.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You have to understand the alcoholic arithmetic and how those equations work.
Oh, that's hilarious.
You got to kind of round up.
Yeah.
We are 100 men and women who have recovered. Right? It was like 60.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to round up. So I don't know that any of this can be gospel accurate, but the story is what's important.
Sure.
The message that's being carried is the important thing. The majority of these people are still sober. Whether that's true or not, that's an important message.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm about the message more than I am about the accuracy today. I'm sorry. I live in the spirit. I live in the world of the spirit. I don't live in the world of the accurate.
That's a great bumper sticker. The bumper stickers are out of date anymore, but I like that. Put that on your license plate.
So Dr. Silkworth 12-stepped 40,000 alcoholics. We are mere pikers, Monty.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't it? Thousands of these He patiently treated long before AA when the chance for recovery was slim. But he always had faith that one day a way out would be found. He never tired of drunks and their problems. A frail man, he never complained of fatigue. During most of his career, he made only a bare living. He never sought distinction. His work was his reward. In his last years, he ignored a heart condition and he died on the job, right among us drunks with his boots on.
Eh,
Wow, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
So so that you know, so Bill considers him a saint, an Alcoholics Anonymous saint.
Yeah,
And with the information that was just provided to us, I would have to agree.
sure. He was right in the middle of doing what he felt God had called him to do. And I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful? I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to predestine anything here, but if we both went home to be with the good Lord in the middle of a broadcast, right? or working
Yeah.
with a sponsee or in a meeting or,
Monty, I'm going to die at a conference. I've already figured that out. You know what I mean? The travel and the conference, it's all a little bit more stressful than my normal life.
Yeah.
So that's probably where I'm going to go. And you know what, God,
You're
I'm
fine with
cool
that.
with that.
Yeah.
I'm so fine with that.
I hear you.
You have no idea. You know what I mean? Where's Chris? He's supposed to speak in an hour. Well, he's not going to be speaking. See that ambulance out there? So yeah. I mean, let's die with our boots on.
Absolutely.
Monty, you're gonna be in the middle of a show. When it happens.
Right? I think you're right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And we can smile when we meet the Maker
that's right.
about that. Who of us in AA can match this record of Dr. Silkworth's? Who has his measure of fortitude, faith, and dedication? So when, 23 years after Dr. Silkworth had treated me for the last time, I saw and heard and felt the spirit that was abroad in the great AMA meeting, I thank God for the doctors, one of the finest groups of friends that AA can ever have. And you know what? I hope that's still true today. There are so many distractions out there. I just saw an article today about a gene therapy that is going to be a cure for alcoholism. Gene therapy, possible cure for alcoholism. It was in the paper today.
Wow.
And yeah, that gene therapy is going to have some application. I am absolutely sure. But would it have cured my toxic experience of self-consciousness, this gene therapy? Would this have cured my selfishness and self-centeredness and self-seeking and my resentments and my anxiety and my guilt and my shame and my remorse? I don't think gene therapy goes that deep. So what they're usually talking about are problem drinkers. Heavy drinkers. What they're usually talking about is to try to relieve people of a craving.
Right.
A lot of harm reduction, Monty, is about relieving the craving.
Sure.
A lot of harm. So just to get out on another tangent, the appropriate use of Suboxone or methadone, it is just the right dosage, so that you are not high, but it takes care of your craving to be high.
Right.
But that's a very, very difficult science to be accurate in. So and all that really is doing is that's taking away your craving. It's not taking away your maladjustment to life. It's not taking away your restlessness, irritability, and discontent. It's not taking away the things that really are the problem when you're an alcoholic or a drug addict.
So I'm sure somebody listening is going to ask this question, so I'm going to ask it. Is it not possible, though, that it can take away some of the physical problems that are associated with, let's say, fentanyl abuse, enough for a person to start the wheels start spinning when it comes to the 12-step process. And, because certainly if they're being affected by opiate-based medications and drugs, they're not thinking clearly. Can these harm reduction methods start getting a person thinking a little more clearly where they never did before?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So let's say you show up in a treatment center and you've been doing 25 bags of dope a day. And you show up in a treatment center. The appropriate approach is to put someone on Suboxone or Subutex or something like that for a period of weeks, and give them a soft landing, so that they don't just bolt out of the place looking for more heroin, so yes, these things is absolutely appropriate, very much appropriate uses. Absolutely. And uh, even lifetime therapy with these drugs is sometimes indicated because long-term opiate abuse so destroys the brain's normal feel-good mechanisms of dopamine and endorphin and those types of brain functions that make us feel okay are so destroyed by this long-term opiate addiction that they're not going to be coming back. So there needs to be some type of replacement for them for someone to be able to have a decent life. And you'll find people on methadone for life. You'll find people on Suboxone for life. I'm not going to make a judgment on whether that's a good thing or a bad
I have
thing.
a friend. I have a friend who, for years, has attempted to get clean off of opiates, and he finally ended up in a Suboxone therapy. And I've got another friend who's a CADC, and he works for that organization. And he says, "Listen, when this guy's on Suboxone and he's learned how to manage it, his life thrives. He's spiritually healthy. His self-centeredness, all that stuff, it improves. But every time, even he weans off the Suboxone."
There's a relapse.
There's a relapse every single time, and this has been going on for years. So they have decided between the parents and all that, he's an adult, but they've all decided he needs to stay on the Suboxone. For him, it's like taking a vitamin, and now I'm having a good day.
And listen, I'm not opposed to something like that. I'm a proponent of harm reduction. I think we should keep people alive. Our lane, Monty, is 12-step abstinent based. That's our lane. That's where we feel comfortable. But that doesn't mean that these other lanes aren't valuable. Now, what doctors understand very, very clearly is when people get off of long-term methadone and wean themselves off, or when they get off of long-term Suboxone and they wean themselves off, there's like a 90% chance of relapse, and the relapse is usually with heroin. And there's a really heightened overdose risk with the people who have weaned themselves off of Suboxone and go back to heroin. Now their risk of an overdose death is multiplied by a ton
because it's progressive, right? Because it's
exactly
progressive.
Yeah. So doctors know this, and when you ask them, if you've been on Suboxone for 3 years, hey, can you help me get off? Their eyes are gonna glaze over. They're not gonna want to play that game because they understand the data. They understand the experience of people that try to do that is way riskier than just staying on it. So there's an on ramp to these things, and there's no off ramp. Not by the professionals.
Yeah.
And that's something else to understand when you're choosing, that pathway rather than a 12-step abstinence-based pathway. That you might have to commit to that pathway.
Sure. So I've got a question for you. Totally switching gears here. The more we read from this book, the more you and I talk about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, the more I learn about people that have been written about in Alcoholics Anonymous. The more I see this incredibly thriving fellowship that is about us, around about us. And somebody said to me, somebody I have a lot of respect for, said something to me the other day, and it kind of threw me. He said, and he's on the board, he's on like every board that exists. He owns a bunch of sober living homes, and he's very, very active. He said, Alcoholics Anonymous is dying, and it'll be dead sooner than we think. And I said, so what makes you say that? And he says, well, with MAT and harm reduction and different organizations doing things, we have the city of Albany here just opened up a 10th city without doing any conditional use permits or asking the neighborhood or anything. Of course, it's causing all sorts of problems. He threw that in the mix. And I said, so you really believe that AA is dying? He said, yep. I said, what about Providence, man? What about God's in control of this thing? Because this guy's a believer, And he said, I'm just telling you, it's dying. What do you think? Do you think it's dying?
I think it's regressing. I don't think it's dying. I think it's regressing. I think it was much more vital 30 years ago when I showed up.
Yeah.
I mean the meetings, the getting together, the social stuff. I mean, it was, we dated each other. We went to the diner every night. We had sober volleyball.
Yeah.
I mean, we did it all, right?
Yeah.
There's none of that. Not in my area anymore. There are meetings, and there's people that sponsor and help people through the steps. But I saw a statistic also today that 37 million people have alcohol use disorder in America. 37 million people, and there's maybe 1 million in AA. There used to be 2 million in AA prior to COVID, right? There's maybe 1 million now. You can make a case that it's declining, and I'm just going to say I believe it's regressing. I also think we're missing the boat with the young people. I think our gathering in church basements is not something the Gen Zs feel comfortable with. You know what I mean? That's not what they do.
Sure.
And I think that there needs to be some real study by people who are serious about carrying the message to the still sick and suffering alcoholic to figure out how to get to people where they are.
And that kind of
we can't sit in the meetings and wait for them to come to us anymore. We
that
can't
kind of,
do that.
That's kind of what Lou G was talking about. And I mean, you and I would hate to think that the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and the program, the main way it's going to be delivered is over an iPad. But if that's the way it goes and it's effective, I'll invest in some iPads. I mean, sometimes us old codgers have got to say, you know what? This is evolving. I don't like the way it's evolving, but it's working. What's the outcome? What's the evidence? And so I wonder about that. Yeah, I don't think it's dying though.
I think there is going to be big books, and I think there are going to be people like you and me, and it might decline to 100,000 members, in 20 years, but it's not going to disappear.
Yeah,
it's too vital of a program. I mean, just think about how many organizations there are out there that are 12-step based. It's just too vital of a spiritual experience. But there are people who are talking about the decline and death of Alcoholics Anonymous, people that I respect a lot. Rick Orstrom is one of them. You know, he's another person that thinks that we're making mistakes. We're not being where we need to be, engaging with the people we need to engage with at their level, in a way they can respond to. And because of that, we're just sitting in our meetings, sharing, and it's going to die if that's what we keep doing.
Yeah. Well, if that is all we do, one would find it pretty easy to think that, and I don't know. I feel very fortunate. My particular 12-step home group is very, I think I've shared it with you before. It's outdoors. It starts at 4:30. It ends at 7. There's barbecue. People get fed. We play games. Cornhole before the meeting. Stuff like that.
Oh, old school, man. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. But please understand that that's the exception. That's not
the exception.
Rule. Right. You go around the country and you find little enclaves of people that have been going to meetings for 100 years who their next door neighbors don't even know they're in AA.
Right.
They're like cloistered into these these small groups of sober people, and if we continue on that path, if we don't find vital ways to carry the message, appropriate ways, effective ways to carry the message, we're gonna regress, and we're gonna lose a lot of fellowship, and a lot of people are gonna die.
I remember something you said one time. You said, yes, it's attraction rather than promotion, but it's got to be attractive. It's got to be something to be attracted to, right? Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, good show, my friend. Thank you so much once again. Next week, remember, listeners, we're talking about being friendly with our friends. And so another group of our friends, believe it or not, is the clergy. So we'll see how that goes.
They are our friends. We'd have no meeting places without them.
Yeah, right. All right. Okay. Closing thoughts, Chris, real quick.
I really enjoy this. I'm looking forward to talking about the clergy next week. I'm sure you're going to have an enormous amount of input because of your participation in the recovery programs that revolve around the church. So
sure.
I'm interested in hearing your experience next week on all that.
All right. All right, my friends, if you want to catch up on the show, listen to at the very end of this as we close out. I'll tell you how to do that. Visit our website at take12radio.com for literally hundreds of recovery shows and recovery music. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man along with Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof.